And just minutes ago, Scott actually just finished laying out his extreme agenda in his State of the State address in Tallahassee. He wants to cut corporate taxes to just 3% and then eliminate them completely by 2018. Combined, he wants to cut $2.5 billion in corporate and property taxes over 2 years. And then in that same 2 years, he wants to eliminate 9,000 jobs from the state's workforce. Gee, I wonder if there's a connection. Even though the state's unemployment in Florida is at a stunning 12%. That's gigantic. And he's cutting more jobs. He wants to privatize Medicaid and the state prison system. Scott claims a profit motive will make them more efficient. Now, there's great irony in that, and I'll explain that in just a moment. This is part of Governor Rick Scott's shtick. He likes to say that he wants to run the state like a business. The state's Republican legislators reportedly don't like being bulldozed by a lone wolf governor who doesn't respect that there are 3 branches of government. But here's the irony about this so-called CEO governor. Scott was the CEO of the nation's largest for-profit healthcare system. He resigned in 1997 in the middle of an FBI investigation into massive fraud. The company pled guilty to 14 felonies, most of which were committed on Scott's watch. The company, Columbia HCA, was forced to pay $1.7 billion in civil and criminal fines for fraudulently overcharging the government, which, by the way, means you, the taxpayer. Now Rick Scott's bragging about being a CEO governor, looking out for the taxpayer? When he was an actual CEO, here's who he looked out for: Rick Scott. Do you know how much he made while he was CEO of that company, running that huge fraud on you, the American taxpayer? In stock options alone, he had over $300 million. You know how much of that he got to keep? All of it. How is this guy governor? And how is he seriously bragging about his CEO credentials and now proposing to privatize essential state functions? Well, to help me answer that question is former Florida Congressman Alan Grayson. Congressman, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Look, I'm going to start with that simple question. How did that guy get elected as governor when he was bragging about his CEO experience where he defrauded the American taxpayer?
Well, the last head of the Republican Party of Florida was literally led away in chains and indicted and put in prison. So the Republican Party reached out to the biggest crook in the state and then nominated him as governor. You didn't mention the fact that he actually pled the fifth 75 times in his deposition. That's like pleading the 375th. And that virtually his entire fortune comes from cheating sick people.
I still can't imagine how you could lose an election to that guy. But anyway, you know, Democrats, look, I know you've been advising them to get stronger this whole time. They could have used a stronger campaign against Governor Scott, if you ask me. But let's talk about what's happening now, okay? They're saying, in essence, the teacher pay cuts here are over $2,300 that he's proposing. And at the same time, property owners are getting about a $45 a year tax cut, let alone the huge corporate tax cuts as well. I mean, do you think the people of Florida are happy with that deal? Do you think, hey, I get to keep 45 bucks and then, you know, we're cutting all this education, we're cutting the pay of the teachers dramatically? Is that a deal they're happy with?
I can make it simpler for you than that. He wants to eliminate the corporate income tax and cut corporations' taxes in Florida by $1.5 billion at the same time that he wants to cut funding for the schools by $1.5 billion. You don't get much simpler than that. He's taking money out of our children's pockets dollar for dollar in order to stuff it in his own, because he thinks that the fundamental problem facing Floridians today is that Rick Scott doesn't have enough money. He wants a cut for rich people. He wants a cut for a tax cut for corporations because he wants a tax cut for Rick Scott. That's his motivation here. He spent $78 million to get the office, and he wants a return on his investment.
Congressman Grayson, how dangerous an idea is it to privatize some of these essential state functions like prisons, where you give people and companies motivation to put more people in prison?
It'll simply never work. I mean, when has it ever worked? We tried to privatize wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we ended up with massive war profiteering, $8 billion simply missing. It's not going to work any better when we're talking about our prisons or our schools or anything else. We have a public school system that dates back to colonial times in America. In fact, we were the first country in the world to have a universal free public school system, and that's what Rick Scott and the Republicans want to destroy.
All right, former Florida Congressman Alan Grayson, we appreciate your time tonight. And you know, it looks like the Republicans are wising up too. It's not just Democrats in Florida; it's Republicans that are complaining about you know, these draconian cuts, and apparently buyer beware. Again, Congressman Grayson, thank you. Now, when we come back, Al Simpson speaks out on Social Security